we go. Can you please state your name and the office you're running for?
My name is Pat Hardy, and I'm running for District 11 on the Texas State Board of Education.
And why are you running for this office?
Well, I have been serving in this capacity since 2002, and I think that I have been very effective on the job. But when I faced whether or not I was going to run again, I have to say there's several issues that I still would like to do some more work on. And one of these would be at the last session of the legislature, they almost did away with the teaching of social studies and American history, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like we have a little bit more of a foundation for that now, that it won't go away, but it's always good to stay in there and see that that's carried out.
And briefly describe your qualifications for the office.
Well, I hesitate to say how many years I've been in education. I guess it would suffice to say I've been in it a long time. I was 30 years as a classroom teacher and 17 years in administration. So I've put in a lot of time in the field of education, but beyond that I have actually worked with a number of different entities. As a teacher consultant with like National Geographic Society and so forth. So I have a broad-based background for education issues. And actually, one of the reasons I ran when I did originally was I kept thinking, they need a voice of an educator on the board. Since then, we have more educator voices on the board, but at one time it was lots of dentists and people like that. I think those are needed on the board, but we also need educators. So I think I represent a broad-based education background.
And what do you feel the proper role of government is?
The proper role in regard to the State Board of Education in general? Well, I do feel like, and that's a very peculiar question to answer, in regard to education, I think it is a state and a local government issue to work on education. I am vehemently opposed to the federal government and what they are trying to do oftentimes in education. I was reading something just the other day, 10% of what the funding we get is from the federal government, 10%. And yet probably 60 to 80% of the rules are coming from the federal government in telling us how to run our education system. For Texas, for example, I've been on the forefront of pushback on the government on something like Common Core. We have our own standards developed by Texans with input from Texas parents and teachers and community leaders. That's what we need to stick with. We don't need the federal government telling us what to do in such areas as standards. So I would like to see as much local government as possible in regard to the role of where government fits into our lives.
What are the top 3 issues for your campaign?
It used to be that we wanted civility brought back to the State Board of Education, but fortunately we've done that. I have some different specific issues. One of the issues that I'd like to see the State Board of Education carry out, but we need the help of the legislature, and that is we developed, under the direction of the legislature 2 years ago, personal financial literacy course. It's a 1-semester course and it's excellent. Well, the more I talk to people, the more I hear that this is something that is desperately needed by our students. And so I would like to see that as a required course for high school graduation, is personal financial literacy. One of the other things that I heard from my constituents and finally got to do something about, and it's now in the new standards, is the return to cursive writing. And cursive is now going to be in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. Well, we can say all we want to that these things should be in the standards, but whether or not those things are carried out is left up to the local school district. And so I would like to be in a position to speak to local school boards and to local superintendent groups, etc., and encourage them to follow the new standards that would include the cursive writing. It's a body of evidence saying how important the cursive writing is to our system. And that's just a couple of the things that I see on the forefront that I would like. And going back to the strengthening of the social studies in our system. It's not being taught. And it's not being taught with the fidelity that the standards require. So I would like to work on that too.
What do you believe are the top 3 things that make you more qualified than your opponent?
Well, again, I hesitate saying this because it makes me seem sort of been around the block a few times, but I have been around the block. I actually worked on the Ross Perot Committee in the No Pass, No Play on the reform movements back in the 80s. And so I've served on several major committees. Consequently, I have a great understanding of how the House Ed Committee works and how the Senate Ed Committee works. They call on me quite often to come and speak before them. And so I have that advantage. I have the advantage of knowing the key players in the education field because I actually worked with a lot of them over the years for different things. And I actually have the ability to talk to people and explain the situation and give a good front to what we're trying to do on the state board. We've been very, very careful under the leadership of Donna Bohorich, who is the chair, to make sure that these things that become explosive issues, such as Mexican-American Studies course and so forth, that we tap it down a great deal. And so we've been very successful in bringing the civility to the State Board of Education and at the same time getting a lot done.
Please describe your political experience as well as experience as an election volunteer, staffer, candidate, or office holder, and be sure to include the names of any candidates or office holders whom you've worked for or volunteered for.
Okay, well, this is again a little bit embarrassing because I was a Goldwater person and I still have my Goldwater pin of the elephant with the horn-rimmed glasses to show my early stages of Republican support and conservative ideas. I did that in high school, and I very unabashedly had all the pins and everything from that time period. Unfortunately, my mother threw that collection away, otherwise I'd probably be a wealthy person today. But I did that for many years, and then as a teacher, I quite often actually took my students to both Republican and Democratic headquarters so they could see how it worked. I worked for someone who is a conservative and at the time was a Democrat because at that time Texas had a lot more Democratic workers. That was Speaker Gibb Lewis. He was my own representative, and he was very important in getting me involved with the reform movement in education. I was on the Bush strike force in 2002 and in 2006, is that it? No, 2000 and then 2004, that was when he ran. I served in Ohio at my own expense, and I served in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the 10 days prior to the election at my own expense. So I've done that. Betty Diano was my precinct chair, and I used to work in the elections with her until, of course, I became a candidate. And then one of my good friends was the late Nick Acuff, who probably was my Tarrant County Republican guide, if any of y'all still remember Nick Acuff. He was a dear friend. And so I've had a love for politics and the conservative movement since I was about 12 or 13 years old.
How would you approach school finance and municipal debt, especially school bonds and the cost per student?
Okay, you're out of my realm of understanding because that does not come under the purview of the State Board of Education. And if you follow much in the media, you find that even though it comes under the purview of the legislature, they haven't been able to come up with the answers to that. I will say that I'm open to whatever the new committee that the legislature just designed at the last legislative session. We have a very, very strong board member, Kevin Ellis, who is serving on that, and I'm anxious to see what they come up with to answer that problem. But it is frustrating for people to look at that and see things, very elaborate things built for schools, and other schools don't have those same conditions. But basically in Texas, if you look at ours compared to most schools throughout the United States, we are in better shape in regard to that. And one of the reasons is the bond guarantee program that we have that's run under the Permanent School Fund as a part of the State Board of Education. And that allows school districts to get AAA rating for when they do their bond issues. So maybe they take a little bit of advantage of that because they're actually saving millions of dollars by having AAA rating and then getting a little over their skis in the actual building of things. But once that is this very, very strong program that we've been able to get in Texas, other states don't have.
How do you feel about school or student vouchers?
I am a believer of school choice. I think every parent has the right to choose whatever they want in the way of parochial school, private school, homeschool, whatever they want. But I do not believe that state money should be sent to any of those entities. I am a strong supporter of the public school and really think that we need to continue to put our resources into the public school.
How do we protect the rights of homeschoolers?
Well, the homeschoolers I have spoken with actually don't like the idea of vouchers because they want to be able to be independent to run their schools as they see fit. And I actually have to say that having become a member of the State Board of Education, I have a greater respect for homeschool because I've seen so many incredible kiddos coming out of the homeschool movement. And I think most homeschool people really just want the independence to be able to educate their child how they wish to do it. And they've been very successful at it. So I also work with the National Geography state program with the National Geographic Society, and many of our winners have been from the homeschool movement.
Great. And is there anything else you'd like to say to the voters or the board?
I would like to say that I have put my heart and soul into this particular job and have enjoyed the work. It is very hard work. I'm not sure if you realize that we're not paid to do the job, but that the sense of volunteerism is very strong, especially in the field of education, because that is kind of what we are taught to do, that we give to the betterment of our community. But I feel like the State Board of Education has been very, very effective, especially in the last, say, 8 or 10 years. We had a lot of hurdles to overcome in the first few years. There was more contention and so forth. Now we tend to get the job done, and like I said, tapping it down, and we haven't gotten much publicity as a result of it, positive.
And do you have a website or any social media you'd like to share?
Oh, I have I have a Twitter account and I have a Facebook account, Elect Pat Hardy. On Facebook, my Twitter, I can't remember what all those things are. They're all written down. I also have the Elect Pat Hardy Facebook, and I have the Twitter account and
Website?
I have a website as well, but it's not. I don't know what any of them are. I have them all written down. Every time I have to put them down, I write them down. You want me to get back to you with those?
Sure, we can post it in the video.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Is that it?
That's it.
I don't